Well, thank goodness we finally talked to her. Susie Laws is a financial expert at Fiducia Wealth Management. That's a firm of independent financial advisors, and she's here to answer your questions on the state pension. Hello, Susie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Let's pick up on Jan's final point there. And lots of people have been talking about this. Here's a text from John in Harwich. I've not heard anyone talking about the freeze in the tax thresholds, although pensions have gone up. Pensioners will start paying tax. I know 2 people that will be paying tax this year. My wife and I will start paying next year. It seems that this is give with one hand and take with the other. So what do you make of this, Susie? And how many people will this affect?
It will affect a lot of people, but not just pensioners, obviously. We've got to bear in mind that it will also affect those in work. But obviously the thresholds have now been frozen until 2027, 2028, assuming obviously there's no changes if we have a change in government at the end of this year. So it means that there's no likely change for people in the short term. And the current final state pension figure of £221 a month uses up most of people's personal allowance. So if anyone has any additional income on top of that in forms of other private pensions or employment income, they will be finding that they're paying basic rate tax.
Right, and that isn't much good, is it? Because if you're on a state pension, it's a fixed income, isn't it? So prices go up, but you maybe not in a position to bring any more money in.
Well, you're not. You're retired, so your ability to accumulate additional wealth, build extra savings, obviously is greatly reduced. However, obviously the state pension does go up with inflation. So in theory, as your bills go up, as we've obviously got the triple lock in place for now, that will protect pensioners to some extent. But they could find that some of their income is fixed. Often private pensions don't always escalate with inflation, so it could be that some of their income does, some of their income doesn't. But it's still a difficult time for a lot of people.
And literally, there's no way around that. There's no way around that. If what you've got coming in tips over that threshold, that's that. You get taxed on it.
Basically, yes. I mean, obviously, you do have different allowances for different types of income. You have some for interest. If you get any interest from savings that potentially falls within a certain band, you can get that tax-free. Likewise, there's a small dividend allowance if you're lucky enough to have any shares or a share portfolio. But a lot of those thresholds have been reduced with successive budgets over the last couple of years. So, again, it's this taxation by stealth, I suppose you could call it, where the tax rates, the basic rate tax band hasn't gone up as such. The higher rate of tax hasn't gone up, but because the thresholds have been frozen and some of the allowances have been reduced, it pushes more and more people into paying more tax.
Susie, it's Tony here. Another question. There's a great article actually on the BBC News website explaining all the details here, but it does point out that if the new flat rate state pension is £221.20 a week, but that's only if you reach pension age after April 2016. If you reached it before, it's £169.50 a week. And this texter says, can someone please explain why there's such a difference between the two levels depending on when you were born?
It's all to do with, obviously, over the years we've had many different variations of the state pension. So the government tried to simplify it by, we used to have what's called additional state pension or second state pension. You might have had the term SERPs, contracted in, contracted out. There were all these different terminologies that were floating around in the pensions world for many years, and for a lot of people the pensions world is confusing enough, and this just added an extra layer of complexity. So the government tried to simplify it, and they basically said, actually, for anyone retiring after that date, rather than potentially having a basic state pension and then some additional pensions via these other mechanisms, they would just have a flat single rate of state pension for all people, which was based on how many years of national insurance contributions you'd made. So to get the maximum amount today, you need to have 35 years.
Okay, here's another one. Anonymous texter says, why is our state pension amongst the lowest in Europe? I mean, how do we compare to other countries?
It is one of the lowest, and historically we have had one of the higher rates of the retirement age, although that's for a lot of Europe has been going up as well. So we're not the only ones who've been increasing our state pension age. I think for a lot of years the state pension in the UK, obviously the reason why they brought in the triple lock was because it wasn't necessarily increasing as fast as earnings and as fast as other things. So there was this perception or reality in some cases that pensioners were being forced more and more into the poverty trap, particularly if they didn't have additional pensions to fall back on. It's one of those things, obviously, that each government has the right to pick how they levy their state pensions, and all of Western Europe, as well as other parts of the Western world, have ageing populations and have this demographic time bomb, so to speak, in terms of how they can sustain this going forward in terms of people who are in work and therefore paying national insurance into the pot to pay for the pensions and other benefits, and those people who are in receipt of them. And it's a challenge across, not just in the UK, it's a challenge everywhere.
Of course, yes, but I mean, just relatively, can you answer that one? Relatively, where are we when we look at the figures?
I don't think there's that much of a disparity now. I think we found there used to be, obviously in Greece particularly, they had a very, very low retirement age for many years. That's been brought up now. So I think whilst historically, yes, we did have potentially higher retirement ages and lower levels of benefit than other countries, I think it's largely very similar now. I don't think it's huge much difference.
Susie, just to end, we were talking to Jan, thankfully, a moment ago. Not Jan, thankfully, Jan eventually, that's what it's called. We were talking to Jan eventually a few moments ago, and she mentioned she resents paying tax now on her pension. So people have presumably been taken into that bracket because the threshold's been frozen. Can you explain what's happened there? And the reason I'm asking that is a text. Somebody's texted the programme to say it equates to £3 to £4 a week. A lot of unnecessary drama from the media and people who seemingly don't understand. Is that the case? I'll let you explain.
Well, obviously, the freezing of the tax allowances is the term is fiscal drag. So with inflation, with wage increases across the whole population, it pushes more and more people into paying tax. And obviously, yes, it's only a few pounds a week, but if you average that out or work that out across the number of people who are paying into pension or receiving their pensions, obviously that's potentially quite a substantial amount of additional tax revenue for the government. And that's obviously one of the reasons why the government haven't raised tax. They haven't raised national insurance because they've been able to generate extra tax revenue through these other means. However, it does potentially penalise those on the lowest levels of income, particularly the freezing of the personal allowance, because that's not now going to increase, obviously, for another 3 years.
OK, listen, Susie, it's been great. We've got to go to the news and sport. The triple knock, just out of interest, I think both the Conservatives and Labour have pledged that they'll keep that. Is that the case?
They have. Obviously, we did see it suspended briefly during very high levels of inflation last year, but it's obviously back in place now. Both parties, for now, have said, obviously, that they will look to retain it going forward.
Good to talk to you, Susie. Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, financial expert Susie Laws there, answering some of your questions on the pensions. Right, it is 6:34 on Drive.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.